Hello everyone, it's Kyle Warsinski and I'm going to be doing my week 2 presentation for MPA 545 explaining 4 of the authors within the Collaborative Approaches to Resolving Conflict book by Eisenhart and Spengel. The first author I chose is in chapter 1 and that's Terrell Northrup. They wrote the book highlighted in slide presentation 1989 and they go into transformational theory and they discuss in the Eisenhart and Spengel book how conflict goes through stages and each stage requires a different strategy. So when you actually read their actual book, chapter 4 talks about transformational theory and it discusses that conflict evolves over time, that there's multiple levels of conflict, social and psychological. You also have multiple factors at any time, at any level, beyond sometimes even the identified problems. And then lastly, you have an issue where you can have subjective and objective components. Subjective or interpretive, and then objective are typically outside or external forces like the economy. So my insight for this one is that it provides much deeper analysis on transformational theory. If that's something you're interested in, I'd suggest finding the Northrop book and reading through a couple of chapters of it. And it's good if you really have that feeling on conflict that it does evolve over time. The second authors that I chose to go for is Fisher and Urey, and that's that Getting to Yes book. In the Spengel and Eisenhart book, it's on page 47. They talk about principled negotiation, in which they have 4 key or core principles that they talk about: separating people from the problem, focusing on interests, and then options for mutual gain, and insist on objective criteria. As you can remember, for the last slide, you had subjective and objective. This one, they really want you to focus on the objective criteria. The book, Getting to Yes, really goes into all 4 of these core principles throughout the entire text. The one thing that I saw quickly in reviewing it over an hour or two was that the book has a lot of examples and a really handy chart on the problem. It talks about which games people are playing, if it's a soft problem or a hard problem, and that has the solutions on the rightermost side of the chart, and it has which principles of the 4 core principles apply. Another thing Fisher and Urey discuss is the 3 stages which are analysis, planning, and discussion, as emphasized by the 3 bottom pictures on this slide. My insight for this text and these authors is that they really focus on the entire process, and I enjoyed the details contained within the book. I really enjoyed reviewing that chart that I tried to describe. So the next author I chose was Keltner in 1987. And in the Eisenhart and Spengel book, it's on page 45. They talk about conflict should be a peaceful, or conflict resolution should be a peaceful procedure which reconciles and or compromises the differences and which depends on good faith and flexibility. I think that's easy to say. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily work that smoothly. The book itself, when you look through and you find the Keltner book, discusses mediation. That's really the core premise of that book, but it applies to the first 3 chapters because they discuss something on the struggle spectrum, and I provided a snapshot of that over on the right. So you have the stages, if you will, but they call it a spectrum, where you start at mild differences, you get to disagreement, You go to dispute, then to campaign or to lobby, then you have litigation, and then the last step, which I think we all understand is conflict that's out of control, is you have fighting or war. It discusses win-lose, win-win situations, and throughout the entire text has detail on negotiation, mediation tactics, and the different levels of conflict I just described. The insight on this one is that I really think it has a wealth of knowledge that we could take away, and it has tactics and levels of the conflict. So the last one to go over real quickly is Alberts and Driscoll. They talk about this is discussed within the conflict spirals section in the Eisenhart and Spengel book on page 17. It really talks about how people respond, reciprocate to intensified in negative manner to threats, devaluation, and insults that occur within an organization. The article itself focuses on a long-term couples engagement and how they treat each other over a long period in time. And by couples, I mean, I believe it's focused on married couples. Negative conflict is bad. Conflict inherently, based on Alberts and Driscoll, is good and important because it encourages each other to be better and to kind of change, to adapt to the other's needs. But negative conflict is bad, and that's what they find within their study. They go through complaint sequences, and they studied 3 groups within the journal article. Study satisfied couples, dissatisfied couples, and mixed that go through different behaviors. And my insight is it really provides a deeper analysis into negative behavior and how it affects a relationship. And you can transition that into your work relationships or relationships with coworkers, those types of things. And that negative behavior is contagious. And then it really talks about the concept, or proves the concept with a study, that 2 wrongs don't make a right. So thank you so much for watching. Sorry it went a little bit over. I tried my best to get everything done quickly. I really look forward to looking at all of your presentations as well. Have a good one.